Have you ever heard of creatures that don't belong in this world? The kind of things that lurk in the shadows, stalking the edge of our reality, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. What if I told you that the government has known about these creatures for decades, studying them, even using them for something far more sinister than we could ever imagine? In 2013, I was sent on a mission for an agency so secretive, its name is only whispered in certain circles. My job: to track down and investigate cryptids, the creatures of folklore, the ones people laugh at, the ones you think are only myths. But what I found in Shoshone National Forest nearly ended me. I encountered a creature that shouldn't exist. It hunted me like prey, twisted and intelligent, and after everything I've seen, I know it's only a matter of time before it strikes again. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. A few miles outside of Shoshone, I came across an old, forgotten cabin deep in the woods. It was abandoned, or so I thought. The wind howled through the trees as I pushed open the creaky door, and that's when I saw it, an old journal buried under layers of dust. The pages were yellowed, the ink faded, but the words they sent chills down my spine. The journal was written by a man who had gone missing years ago in the same area I was investigating. His last entry: it spoke of something watching him from the trees, following his every move, and how it had begun mimicking his voice, calling out to him from the darkness, like it knew his every thought. I thought it was just a story, a warning from the past. But then, the very same thing started happening to me. I started hearing whispers, my name coming from the trees, calling out to me when I was alone in the forest. And each time I turned, there was nothing there, just the wind and the endless dark. And that's when I realized I wasn't alone in those woods. This is a fictional story created for entertainment. While it may feel real, the events, creatures, and encounters are purely imaginative. Enjoy the thrill, but remember, it's all just a story. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more chilling tales like this one. By subscribing, you'll help us create more terrifying content, taking you deeper into the mysteries of the unknown. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Subscribe now and join us in unraveling the secrets that lie beyond the veil. Part 1: The Mysterious Mission. It was the kind of morning where everything felt wrong. There was no noise, no hum of chatter, no ringing phones, no murmurs of agents talking shop in the halls. Just silence. The kind of eerie quiet that crawls under your skin, burrowing into your thoughts until all you can hear is the pounding of your own heart. I knew something was coming. I could feel it in the air, thick and heavy, as if the very atmosphere around me had changed. The hallways felt sterile, too bright, too still, and I felt as if I were walking through a fog, though the air was clear. Each footstep echoed louder than usual, bouncing off the cold tiles, making the stillness feel almost suffocating. I should have been used to this by now, but I was. No matter how many times I'd done this job, there was something unsettling about it. The weight of the work, the lives at stake, the things we investigated that no one ever spoke about, none of that could ever be prepared for. Every assignment carried its own unique dread, like the world was warning you that you'd never really be safe again. As I reached my desk, I could feel my breath catch in my throat. The folder sitting there was heavier than usual. I didn't need to open it to know it was important. I could sense it in the way the file stared at me, waiting to unveil something I wasn't ready for. Ronald Pierce, my supervisor, handed it over to me without a word. He had that look on his face, the kind of face that told you nothing good was inside. He didn't need to explain. He never did. "You're going to Morgantown," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Cooper's Rock State Forest, it's bad. You're going in PICE." PICE. The acronym that made my stomach drop. It stood for Preliminary Investigation and Cryptid Evaluation, which meant this mission had all the hallmarks of a creature hunting assignment. The kind of case where the agency sends its best, or at least the ones they can afford to lose. You see, most people think that cryptids are a joke, that Bigfoot, Mothman, or whatever else we call them are just stories. But the truth is darker. The government knows about them. They always have. The agency I work for, the one no one talks about, is the shadow arm that deals with these creatures, keeping the public blissfully ignorant while we clean up the messes they leave behind. I glanced down at the folder, the weight of it pressing down on me. It contained the names of 4 missing people, all hikers who had gone missing in the last 2 weeks. It didn't take long to see the pattern. They had all disappeared in or near the same area, Cooper's Rock State Forest. The place was dense, wild, and largely uncharted, perfect hunting grounds for a creature that didn't want to be found. The brief file didn't offer much more than that. No pictures, no specifics on the creatures we were hunting, just a list of names and the unsettling phrase, unusual activity suspected. It was up to me to fill in the blanks. I gathered my gear and headed out, trying to ignore the gnawing sensation in my gut. The kind of feeling you get when you know you're about to step into something that will change you. Again. The drive to Morgantown was uneventful, but my mind raced as I made my way eastward. The quiet stillness of the office, the weight of the file in my hands, everything felt like a sign that this mission was different. Worse. I had seen things before, things that no one should ever see. Creatures, twisted and unnatural, crawling through the woods like something out of a nightmare. But this felt like something darker. Something older. The drive took me through winding roads, covered in the vibrant hues of autumn, the trees painted in shades of red, gold, and orange. It was beautiful, but the beauty didn't soothe me. It made me feel small, insignificant. Like I was a bug, caught in the web of something far more dangerous than I could comprehend. Cooper's Rock State Forest was located just outside Morgantown, and the landscape changed drastically the closer I got. The air thickened, the trees grew more densely packed, the branches tangled like skeletal hands reaching for the sky. The forest was silent, its weight pressing in on me as I neared the park. No birds, no wildlife. It was just me and the road, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. When I arrived, I pulled into a secluded ranger parking area, the kind of place no one would think to check. I wasn't there to be seen. My cover was simple, wildlife specialist. I had an ID that matched and a bag of gear in the trunk, nothing extraordinary. But as I locked my truck and walked toward the ranger station, I felt the cold grip of dread settle in my chest. Inside, I met Gabriella Ross, a park ranger who was assigned to show me around. She was younger than I expected, in her early 30s, with tired eyes and an anxious demeanor. She seemed like someone who had seen too much, someone who had already realized that the woods weren't just full of trees. They were full of secrets. Her voice trembled when she spoke about the missing hikers. The pattern was unnerving. 4 people, all different ages, all vanished without a trace. No sign of struggle. No signs of animal attacks. The only clues were the odd markings left behind, deep scratches on the ground, large, uneven footprints that didn't match any known species, and a single phone that had been found near a rocky overlook, smeared with mud and blood. I nodded, but the weight of her words hit me harder than I expected. She seemed to be holding something back, but I didn't press her. Not yet. "Are there any large animals around here?" I asked, trying to get more information. "We have black bears, some bobcats. Nothing big enough to take down a grown man without leaving a trace," she said, though her voice faltered when she added, "no large cats that we know of." But that didn't make sense. Nothing added up. A bear. Maybe, but no, something was off. I could feel it. I asked her about the forest, about any strange occurrences. Hikers keep vanishing, she replied quietly. I used to hike there alone, not anymore. I didn't ask her why. I didn't need to. With her help, I began my investigation, slowly making my way down the path where the hikers had disappeared. It was narrow at first, then quickly narrowed even more, shaded by tall hardwoods. The damp earth beneath my boots felt like a warning. The forest smelled of decaying leaves, wet soil, and something else. The air had a strange heaviness to it. No birds, no animals. Just the sound of my breath and the muffled crunch of leaves beneath my feet. By late afternoon, I reached a limestone outcrop. Beyond it, the land dropped steeply, and a wide hollow stretched below. The wind kicked up, sending leaves swirling across the rocks. I crouched down, examining the area for any sign of a struggle. My eyes caught a dark stain on one of the rocks, fresh, like blood splattered from an impact. It wasn't from a fall. The pattern was too irregular for that. I brushed my hand over the rock, feeling the damp stone beneath my fingertips. The blood, it seemed, had been there a while, but it wasn't old. I took a sample with a cotton swab and sealed it in a plastic tube. It was then that I saw the fresh scuff marks leading deeper into the woods. They weren't like regular footprints. They were strange, narrow at the front, with a much heavier heel. I couldn't make sense of them. They didn't belong to any known animal, but they were undeniably there. As I returned to my motel room later that night, I felt the weight of what I had uncovered settling on my chest. I had seen evidence, heard the strange stories, but nothing could prepare me for what lay ahead. These woods were no ordinary wilderness. There was something dark here, something that had been hiding for a long time, waiting to be uncovered. And I was the one who had come to find it. Part 2. The disappearances and initial investigation. By the time the sun began to set, casting a muted orange hue over the horizon, I realized just how deep I had wandered into the heart of the wilderness. The further I moved from the ranger station, the more the forest seemed to swallow me whole. It wasn't the typical, comforting quiet of nature I was used to, no gentle rustling of leaves, no distant chirping of birds or scurrying of small animals. It was as if the forest had been silenced, its natural inhabitants either hidden or driven away by something unseen. I felt like I was intruding on a place that didn't want me here. I continued down the trail, carefully picking my way through the underbrush, the dense trees towering overhead like silent, watchful sentinels. The air felt heavy, thick with something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It wasn't just the humidity, nor was it the usual earthy scent of the forest floor. There was something wrong. The deeper I walked, the more the world around me seemed to close in, the trees growing taller and more twisted, their limbs reaching out like bony hands. The darkness was already creeping in, wrapping itself around the edges of the forest as if it were waiting for something, or someone. I paused for a moment to adjust the straps on my backpack, my thoughts racing. The missing hikers had all disappeared in different areas, yet all the trails led to the same place, a remote, overgrown part of the park. There were signs of something moving through the undergrowth, but no tracks, no evidence of any animals large enough to take down a grown human. I was beginning to wonder if I was chasing shadows, or if there was something far worse lurking in the woods, something with intelligence, something that knew how to hide. The strangeness of silence. The deeper I ventured into the park, the more I felt the absence of life around me. Normally, in a forest like this, you'd hear the soft sounds of nature, the wind whispering through the trees, the occasional call of a bird, the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush. But here, there was nothing. Just the crunch of my boots on the damp earth and the occasional distant crack of a tree branch swaying in the wind. A deafening silence. Even my dog, Rocky, had fallen strangely quiet. His usual enthusiasm, his tail wagging eagerly as we moved along, had dissipated. Instead, he walked close to my side, his eyes constantly darting around, alert to something I couldn't see. By the time I reached the clearing, the sun had dipped behind the trees, leaving the forest cloaked in shadow. I stopped to check my map, to make sure I hadn't wandered too far off course, and that's when I saw it. A trail of broken branches, a scuff of dirt, and then blood, dark, dried blood smeared on the trunk of a tree. My pulse quickened. I crouched down to inspect it more closely. The blood wasn't fresh. It had begun to dry, and the smell, it lingered in the air, thick and metallic, almost suffocating. It was only then that I realized how quiet the forest had become. The birds had stopped singing, the insects had stopped buzzing. Everything around me seemed to be holding its breath, as if waiting for something. "Rocky," I whispered, barely audible, my voice trembling. The dog growled low in his throat, his body stiffening as his gaze locked onto something in the distance. But there was nothing there, only the trees, the silence. The further I examined the bloodstain, the more I realized that it wasn't a normal trail. It was scattered in a pattern, almost as if something had been dragged or perhaps dragged itself. It wasn't like any animal attack I had ever seen. There were no puncture wounds, no teeth marks. It was just blood, a lot of blood. And something else was out there, something that moved with purpose. A discovery that shouldn't be there. I decided to follow the blood trail, my heart pounding in my chest. The path led me deeper into the forest, further away from the main trails, where the woods were thick and the ground uneven. The trees seemed to lean in closer, their branches tangled overhead, cutting off much of the remaining daylight. I had to move slowly, cautiously, careful not to make too much noise, but also careful not to lose the trail. The path wound through dense thickets, and with every step I became more aware of the unease gnawing at the back of my mind. It was as though the forest was alive, watching me. Every crack of a twig underfoot seemed to echo loudly in the stillness. Every rustle of leaves seemed unnatural. My senses were heightened, alert to the slightest movement. It was then that I saw it, another mark. A large, scuffed impression in the earth, deeper than a normal footprint, shaped oddly, almost like a hoof, but not quite. I knelt down, inspecting it, my breath coming in shallow gasps. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was something else. I felt a cold chill run down my spine, and I knew at that moment that I was no longer just following the trail of a missing hiker. I was tracking something far more dangerous. I snapped a few photos of the track and continued on, my mind racing with possibilities. Had it been a bear, a mountain lion, but the size of the track, it didn't match anything I knew. No, this was something else, something larger, something with a purpose. As I moved forward, the path became steeper, leading me toward a small cliffside. There I found something more disturbing, a torn piece of clothing. I picked it up carefully, feeling the cold fabric between my fingers. It was a shirt, maybe from a man, judging by the size, though it was ripped in several places as if it had been clawed or dragged. It didn't have blood on it, but it smelled. The scent of decay. And then the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The forest had grown even quieter, if that was possible. The air felt thick, too thick, like it was pressing in on me from all sides. I felt as though the trees themselves were moving, their branches swaying in a way that didn't seem natural. I looked up. There, high in the branches of a nearby tree, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A shape, a shadow. Something was watching me from above, something that wasn't human. The realization. My body went rigid with fear, but I couldn't look away. The shape was too large to be a bird, too agile to be a simple animal. It crouched in the tree, hidden behind the leaves, but its eyes, those eyes, glowed faintly in the dimming light. I couldn't make out any other details, but I didn't need to. I knew. I felt it deep in my bones. I wasn't hunting it anymore. It was hunting me. My hand instinctively went for my rifle, but as soon as I reached for it, the shape darted away, faster than I could react. It was gone, vanished into the forest. I froze, unsure of what to do next. Was I just imagining things? Was the fear getting to me? I shook my head, trying to push the panic out of my chest. But the sound of cracking branches behind me shattered my thoughts. Before I could turn, something heavy landed on the ground just a few feet away from me. My heart stopped. Part 3. Unearthly Signs and Growing Suspicion. The tension in the air was palpable, and as I stood frozen, my breath shallow in the dense, damp forest, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was moving in the shadows. My heart raced, a cold sweat trickling down the back of my neck despite the chill in the air. There, high in the tree, I had seen it, the unmistakable shape, eyes glowing faintly, watching me from the darkness. I hadn't imagined it. I couldn't have. For a brief moment, I stood motionless, every sense on high alert, my hand hovering near my rifle. The faintest sound, a rustle of leaves, the creak of a branch, was enough to send my pulse skyrocketing. The forest was holding its breath, as if it, too, was aware of the unseen danger lurking in its depths. I scanned the tree line again, hoping that what I had seen had been a trick of the light or a figment of my overactive imagination. But there was no denying it. I had felt its presence, and now it felt as though I was being stalked, hunted by something that was far more than a mere animal. Whatever it wasn't just observing. It was waiting for the right moment to strike. Rocky, who had been unusually quiet and obedient up until now, was now crouched low to the ground, his ears flat against his skull, a soft growl vibrating in his throat. He could sense it too. Whatever it wasn't natural. I couldn't help but feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end, a primal fear coursing through my veins. My breath hitched in my chest as I took a slow step back, careful not to make a sound. But the forest was alive with noise now, branches creaking, the sound of something moving through the underbrush. I couldn't pinpoint it, but I knew it was there, just beyond my reach. I had to keep moving. I couldn't afford to freeze, not in a place like this, where the very earth beneath my feet seemed to be watching me. The forest felt different, unnaturally still and quiet, and it was as if the trees themselves were waiting for something to happen. I pushed forward, telling myself that I had a job to do, that the forest, though vast and mysterious, was no different from any other investigation I had been on. I was here to find the truth, to uncover whatever was behind the disappearances, and I couldn't let my fear dictate my actions. But as the darkness deepened and the air grew heavier, I found myself questioning whether I was truly prepared for what was waiting in these woods. The unseen eyes. The deeper I went, the stranger the forest became. The path ahead grew increasingly overgrown, the ground slick with moss and damp leaves. Every step I took seemed to carry me further into a place that shouldn't be, as if the forest itself was shifting beneath my feet. There were no signs of wildlife, no birds, no small animals skittering across the ground. It was as if the forest had gone mute, its usual symphony of sounds replaced by an oppressive, deafening silence. I kept my senses sharp, scanning the shadows around me, but everything felt out of place. There were no fresh tracks, no signs of human activity, nothing that explained the disappearances, nothing that could offer a clue to the cause. The only thing that seemed odd were the marks on the ground, the faint impressions in the earth. They were hard to identify, but they weren't human. Suddenly, a sound broke the silence, a rustle in the leaves, followed by the faintest snap of a twig. I whipped around, my rifle raised, but saw nothing. I knew I wasn't alone. The feeling of being watched had intensified. It wasn't just the occasional glance over my shoulder anymore. It was constant. Something was out there, moving in the periphery of my vision just beyond the trees. But every time I turned, there was nothing. Only the dense foliage, the twisted trunks of trees, and the cold, still air. It wasn't until I reached the small clearing that I found my first real clue. The trees opened up into a small, overgrown space, their roots twisting above the soil in tangled knots. The sun had long disappeared behind the clouds, and the forest floor was bathed in the dull light of dusk. It felt almost sacred, like an ancient, forgotten place that had been untouched for centuries. But what caught my attention wasn't the strange beauty of the space. It was the blood, fresh blood. There on the ground, smeared across the rocks and leaves, was a patch of dark crimson, almost black in the fading light. It wasn't a small amount either. Whoever, or whatever, had left it behind had been in serious pain. It trailed along the earth, leading off into the thicket as if something had been dragged away. I knelt down, my heart hammering in my chest. This wasn't the blood of an animal, I could tell that much. The scent was too sharp, too pungent to be anything other than human. I had seen enough to know that it wasn't an animal attack. It was something else, something worse. My thoughts raced as I followed the trail. I knew the pattern by now. This was no ordinary creature. Whatever had caused this was intelligent, calculating. It was hunting. And it wasn't just hunting animals. It was hunting people. The tracks that shouldn't be. I continued to follow the blood trail, my mind spinning with possibilities. Who, or what, was leaving this behind? The path led deeper into the forest, winding through thick underbrush, past jagged rocks and toward the base of a steep hill. The blood was still fresh, still damp, but it was no longer as abundant as before. The trail was thinner now, like the thing responsible for it had become more careful, more cautious. That's when I saw the tracks. At first I thought it was just an animal, maybe a bear, maybe a large cat. But as I crouched down to inspect them, I realized something was wrong. These tracks were too large, and the shape was entirely unfamiliar. They had the vague shape of a hoof, but they didn't belong to any known species. There was a deep indentation in the ground, as if whatever had left it had a heavy, powerful weight. And then the edges of the tracks were wrong. They weren't clean like a normal animal's print. They were smudged, uneven, as if something with a strange gait had left them behind. Something that moved in a way that wasn't natural. I took a photo, marking the tracks with my evidence tags. This wasn't a wild animal. This was something else, something large, something dangerous. I followed the tracks, my instincts screaming at me to turn back, but my curiosity, the same thing that had gotten me into this job in the first place, kept pushing me forward. The unseen terror. As I continued along the trail, the light began to fade, the trees growing darker with each passing minute. The air grew colder, and the silence that had blanketed the forest all day became deafening. I was aware of every breath, every step. Every rustle of the leaves felt like an omen. And then I heard it. A low growl. The kind that rumbles deep in your chest. A primal sound that makes your skin prickle with fear. It came from behind me, from the darkness where the trees merged into shadows. My heart skipped a beat. I turned quickly, my rifle aimed toward the sound, but there was nothing there. Nothing but the eerie quiet of the forest. The growl had stopped as quickly as it had started. I swallowed hard, my pulse racing. My mind was spinning. This wasn't the sound of a bear. It wasn't the sound of any animal I had encountered. This was something else, something that was toying with me. I moved cautiously, my eyes darting between the trees, trying to spot any movement. And that's when I saw it. A figure. barely visible in the deepening twilight, standing still among the trees. A shadow watching me. Its eyes, those eyes, glowed faintly in the dark, pale and cold, like a reflection in the water. It was no more than a silhouette, but I knew. I knew it was the creature I had been hunting, and it was waiting for me. Part 4. First encounter with the creature. The wind picked up as I continued deeper into the forest, my boots crunching against the damp, uneven ground. Every now and then, the wind would stir the leaves, sending them swirling in lazy, erratic patterns, but for the most part, the forest was eerily still. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath, their twisted branches forming a dense canopy that shut out the sky. It was the kind of silence that felt oppressive, as if the world itself had forgotten how to make noise. With every step, the sense of unease grew. The strange tracks I had found earlier, those smudged, unnatural hoofprints, played in my mind like a broken record. It felt like the woods themselves were conspiring against me, the trees leaning in closer, the shadows growing longer. The deeper I ventured, the more I felt like I was stepping into a realm where reality was twisted and nothing made sense. Something had changed in the forest, something ancient, something that had been dormant for a long time. Rocky, usually the calm one, was now restless. He darted between the trees, his ears twitching at every sound, his body tense. I tried to reassure him, but my own nerves were starting to get the better of me. I had been a part of this operation for years, tracking cryptids, investigating strange disappearances, but nothing had prepared me for this. I wasn't just dealing with a creature of folklore this time. Whatever was hunting these people, whatever had left those tracks, was no myth. It was real, and it was out there somewhere watching me. The first sight. I came upon the clearing as the light began to fade, the last remnants of daylight casting long shadows across the forest floor. It was a strange sight, a wide, open space in the midst of the dense woods, like a forgotten part of the land. At the center of the clearing was an ancient oak tree, its twisted roots gnarled and exposed like the fingers of a giant reaching up from the earth. The tree seemed out of place, ancient beyond belief, its bark cracked and scarred, as though it had witnessed things no tree should have seen. As I stepped into the clearing, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The air was thick, like a heavy fog that clung to my skin. But it wasn't just the air, it was the sensation that I wasn't alone. Something in the clearing seemed to breathe, though I couldn't see it. Something ancient, something hidden in plain sight. It was as though the earth itself was watching, listening. I reached the oak, crouching beside it, trying to calm my breathing. The ground was damp here, the soil softer than the rest of the forest floor. I brushed aside a patch of moss and found a set of deep gouges in the earth, as if something heavy had been dragged across the soil. There were no footprints, no trail of disturbed earth, just these marks as though something had been pulled, something large, something powerful. I took a photo, marking the spot with a small evidence tag. My mind raced. The markings didn't make sense. They weren't animal tracks. They were deliberate, and that meant something intelligent was out there, something that knew how to hide its tracks, to move through the forest without leaving a trace. And then I heard it, a low, guttural growl that reverberated through my chest. It wasn't the sound of a bear. It wasn't the growl of anything I had ever heard before. It was deep and animalistic, filled with malice, but there was something else in it, something primal. Something that knew exactly what it was doing. My pulse quickened and I stood up, my hand instinctively going to my rifle. I scanned the tree line, but there was nothing. The growl had stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence. My breath echoed in my ears, and for a moment I was sure that everything was in my head, that I was imagining it. But then I saw it. A shape. A flicker of movement between the trees. It was too fast to make out clearly, but I could see it. A dark silhouette darting between the trunks, moving with unnatural speed. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a wolf. It was something else entirely. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. The air around me felt colder now, the shadows deeper. The creature was close. It was watching me, and I could feel its eyes on me, though I couldn't see it. It was just beyond the veil of the trees, just out of sight, but I could feel its presence. It wasn't like the animals I had hunted before. It wasn't like anything I had ever encountered. The encounter. I didn't know what I expected, but the sudden movement of branches to my left made me jump. The creature was closer now, too close. I could hear its breathing, harsh and ragged, echoing through the forest like the wind in the trees. My fingers tightened around the rifle, but my hands were shaking so badly that I could barely keep a steady aim. I had been trained for this. I had been prepared for everything, but nothing had prepared me for this. It was there in the shadows, emerging from the underbrush. The first thing I saw were its eyes, pale, glowing, almost unnatural. They burned with an intensity that seemed to pierce through me, as though it could see into my very soul. Its face was wrong, twisted, almost human, but not quite. The skin was stretched too tightly over its bones, its mouth wide and jagged, filled with sharp teeth that looked like they could tear through flesh in a single bite. Its body was hunched, covered in matted fur that seemed to shimmer with an unnatural sheen in the dim light. And then it moved. Fast. Too fast. It lunged at me with an unnatural speed, its claws outstretched, its growl reverberating in the air like a roar from some ancient beast. I fired instinctively, the shot ringing out in the stillness of the forest. The creature screamed, a sound that ripped through the air, sharp and screeching, as if the very forest was screaming in pain. But it didn't stop. The bullet didn't faze it. It kept coming, faster now, its body a blur of fur and teeth. I stumbled back, my rifle raised again, but I was too slow. It was on me in an instant, its claws slashing at the air. I barely managed to duck in time, the creature's claws grazing my shoulder, leaving a deep gash that burned like fire. I scrambled backward, my mind racing. I had no time to think. My body was moving on pure instinct, trying to survive. It lunged again, its jaws snapping just inches from my face. I felt its hot breath on my skin, the rancid stench of decay filling my nose. I reached for my knife, but the creature was too fast, its claws tearing into my arm, sending waves of pain through my body. I screamed, the sound raw and primal as I pushed myself to my feet, stumbling away from the creature. My mind was a blur, but one thought rang through my head: I had to survive. I had to get away. I ran. As fast as I could, despite the pain, despite the blood that was now seeping through my clothes. The creature didn't stop. It was right behind me, its growl getting louder with every step, its claws scraping against the earth. The escape. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The only thing that mattered was getting to the truck. I pushed through the brush, stumbling over rocks and roots, my heart pounding in my chest. The growl was closer now, so close that I could hear the creature's heavy breathing, its footsteps crashing through the underbrush behind me. I reached the clearing. My truck was just beyond the trees, a beacon of safety in the middle of the forest. I ran harder, the pain in my side nearly unbearable, but I couldn't stop. Not now. I reached the truck, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the keys. The creature's growl sounded louder, more desperate. It was only a few feet away. I could hear it, feel it, but I didn't stop. I threw myself into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut just as I heard the creature's claws scrape against the side of the truck. I started the engine, my hands shaking as I hit the gas, the tires screeching against the dirt as I tore down the road. The creature's roar echoed behind me, but I didn't look back. I couldn't. I just kept driving, faster and faster, until the forest finally gave way to the town and the creature was lost in the rearview mirror. Part 5. The Deadly Chase. The truck's tires skidded through the gravel road, throwing up dirt and dust as I floored the accelerator, desperate to escape the nightmare I had just narrowly survived. The forest, the very place I had come to investigate to solve a mystery, had become a place of terror. The creature, that thing, wasn't just a hunter, it was a nightmare made flesh, and I had barely escaped with my life. The headlights cut through the darkness, but the thick trees along the road made the night feel even more oppressive. My mind raced with thoughts of what I had just encountered. What was that thing? Where did it come from? And how had it been able to move so fast? It was a predator, intelligent, cunning, more than any wild animal I had ever faced. I took a sharp turn, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. The truck swerved slightly, but I regained control. The pain in my side from the creature's claws sent a wave of dizziness through me, but I couldn't stop. Not yet. I had to get out of there, far away from whatever was hunting me. The growl still rang in my ears. The sound of its breath, the sharp scrape of its claws against the earth, it haunted me, echoing like a sickening memory. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, following me just beyond the trees, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike again. I tried to tell myself it was over. I had made it to the truck and it was gone. But the truth was, I couldn't be sure. Nothing in that forest was what it seemed. The road ahead seemed to stretch endlessly, a ribbon of blackness that only ended when I finally reached the outskirts of town. I slowed down, my eyes darting between the rearview mirror and the road ahead, half expecting the creature to leap out of the darkness and tear through my windshield. But there was nothing, nothing except the vast, empty stretch of road behind me. An uneasy return. When I finally parked at a motel on the outskirts of Morgantown, I couldn't bring myself to leave the truck. I sat there for what felt like hours, my hands still shaking from the adrenaline, my mind replaying the encounter. The creature's eyes, the way it moved so fluidly, so unnaturally fast, was burned into my memory. There was no way it was a bear, no way it was anything I had ever seen before. I grabbed my bag, still trying to steady my breath, and walked slowly toward the motel door. The manager barely looked up when I entered, too busy with the evening news playing on the TV. The local news anchor was talking about the recent disappearances in the area. Strange, unexplained, but nothing out of the ordinary, at least not yet. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if the town had heard rumors of a large, monstrous creature lurking in the woods, or if they were all blissfully unaware of the terror hidden just beyond their backyards. I went up to my room and locked the door behind me. The motel was cheap, but I didn't care. I didn't have the energy to do anything but collapse onto the bed, my thoughts a mess of confusion and fear. I didn't realize how exhausted I was until I closed my eyes. But even then, sleep didn't come easy. Every noise, every creak of the building made me jump. Every small sound felt like it could be the creature, coming back to finish what it had started. The room that shouldn't be empty. The next morning, I tried to push everything out of my mind. I couldn't let fear control me. I had a job to do. The forest still held answers, and I couldn't leave until I found them. I headed straight to the ranger station. Gabriella Ross was there again, sitting at the counter, her eyes weary, like she had been waiting for someone to show up. "You okay?" she asked as I walked in, her voice gentle but with an undercurrent of something darker. "I don't know," I replied, my voice hollow. "I thought I saw something in the woods last night." Her eyes didn't betray any surprise, but I noticed her hand tighten around the coffee cup in front of her. "Something or someone?" she asked cautiously. "Something," I answered, leaning in closer. Big, fast, too fast. It didn't move like any animal I've ever seen. It's hunting people, Gabriella. Her eyes flickered with something I couldn't place, fear, perhaps, or maybe just a recognition that something worse than an animal was in these woods. I know, she said quietly, her voice shaking slightly. I've heard the stories. The forest isn't like it used to be. People don't just go missing around here without a reason. I took a deep breath. What are we dealing with here, Gabriella? This isn't just some animal. It's intelligent. It's playing with us, watching us. What the hell is it? Gabriella didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood and walked to the back of the station. When she came back, she was holding a small, worn book, its pages yellowed with age. This isn't something we talk about, she said, glancing over her shoulder. But you need to know the truth. If you're going to survive here, you need to understand what's out there. She opened the book, flipping through the pages until she reached a worn map of the area, scribbled with markings. What we have here isn't just any cryptid, David. This is something older, something that's been here for centuries. I leaned in, my breath catching as I scanned the page. The map was filled with strange symbols, ones that I didn't recognize, but that sent a chill through me as I traced them with my finger. It's a thing of legend, Gabriella said. The Wendigo, or something like it. A creature that feeds on human fear. It's ancient, and it's been in these woods for as long as anyone can remember. It's not like the others you've hunted. It's smarter. Cunning, and it thrives in the darkness. I stared at her in disbelief. The Wendigo, you're telling me it's real? She nodded. It's real, and it's hunting in these woods again. People think it's just stories, old folklore, but it's not. It's here. And it's hungry. The Wendigo's hunger. I had heard the legends before, back home, in old books and stories passed down through the years. The Wendigo was said to be a monstrous creature from the Native American folklore, a spirit cursed with an insatiable hunger for human flesh. But this was different. This wasn't just a story, it was real, and it was hunting in these woods. Gabriella continued, her voice barely above a whisper. The forest doesn't just hide it, it protects it. The Wendigo feeds on fear, David. It's not just hunting for food, it's hunting for emotion, for fear. The more you fear it, the stronger it becomes. And once it has you, it doesn't let go. My stomach turned. This wasn't what I had signed up for. I wasn't just hunting a cryptid anymore. I was hunting something ancient, something with power beyond anything I had ever encountered. The creature wasn't just hiding in the shadows, it was woven into the fabric of the forest itself. Gabriella's eyes were filled with a fear I hadn't seen before. The last time it was active in these woods, it wiped out entire groups. People went missing and no one ever found them. It's been quiet for years, but now. She trailed off, her gaze hardening. It's back. I stood in silence, trying to process what she had said. The weight of it settled on me like a rock in my chest. The Wendigo, it wasn't just a myth, a creature of folklore. It was a predator, an intelligent, calculating monster that fed on the very essence of fear, and it had come for us. Part 6. The dark truth behind the creature. The realization that I was hunting something as old and malevolent as the Wendigo sent a cold shiver through my body. It was hard to process, the fact that I wasn't just chasing a creature for the government anymore. No, this was something far more dangerous, far more intelligent. This was a being that thrived on fear, that fed on the very essence of its victims, growing stronger with every passing day. I spent the next few hours poring over the book Gabriella had given me. The worn pages filled with sketches of the Wendigo, stories about its insatiable hunger, its ability to blend into the environment, becoming one with the forest. Each entry was more chilling than the last, describing the creature's insidious tactics, how it hunted, how it waited for the perfect moment to strike. But the most terrifying part of all was the description of what would happen to its victims. The Wendigo didn't just kill. It drove people mad, feeding off their fear and isolation until there was nothing left but terror. Some stories said it would possess its victims, twisting their minds and bodies into grotesque, twisted versions of themselves. Others claimed that once the Wendigo had consumed its fill, it would move on, leaving the bodies behind like empty husks, drained of all life. Gabriella had warned me that the creature's hunger wasn't just for flesh, it was for the fear, the dread that surrounded its prey. And once it had tasted that fear, it would never stop hunting, tracking the Wendigo. With a new sense of urgency, I headed back into the forest the next day. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the ground, but the forest felt darker somehow, even in the early morning light. I kept my rifle close, every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves making my heart race. I knew it was out there, watching me, just beyond the veil of the trees. The Wendigo wasn't going to give up. It had been in these woods for centuries, and it wasn't about to leave without finishing what it had started. The missing hikers, the disappearances, the broken lives, none of it was by chance. The Wendigo had been feeding on them, using their fear as sustenance. And now it had its sights set on me. I moved quickly, my mind constantly searching for any sign, any clue that would lead me to it. The woods, once so calm, now felt alive, as if the trees themselves were conspiring to keep me from finding what I was searching for. The tracks I had followed the day before were still there, but now they seemed to disappear into the thick underbrush, as if the creature was actively trying to cover its tracks, hiding its presence from me. But then I saw it again, another set of footprints, deeper this time, pressed into the soft earth near a clearing. The footprints were odd, elongated, with a narrow front that flared into a wider heel. They were larger than any human track I had seen before, but they were clearly not from any animal I knew. I crouched down, examining the marks carefully. This wasn't just a cryptid. It was something that had adapted to the forest in ways I couldn't understand. The tracks led me deeper into the woods, through thick brush and over rocky terrain, until I reached the base of a cliffside. I paused, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. The air felt heavier here, the weight of it pressing down on me. Something was watching me. I could feel its eyes on me, even though I couldn't see it. I took a few steps forward, my breath quickening, and that's when I heard it. The low growl, distant but unmistakable. It was closer now. I could feel it. The creature wasn't hiding anymore. The first attack. The growl echoed through the trees, sending a shiver down my spine. My heart raced, and for a moment I thought about turning back, but I couldn't. I had come too far to turn back now. I had to find the Wendigo, had to put an end to this. I crouched behind a large rock, peering through the gaps in the trees, my eyes searching the shadows for any sign of movement. I didn't know how it would attack, what tactics it would use, but I knew I had to be ready. The wind shifted, the trees rustling, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat in my ears. Then it appeared, a blur of motion, a shadow darting between the trees. It was fast, too fast. The Wendigo moved with an unnatural speed, its glowing eyes catching the faint light as it darted between the trees. I barely had time to react. I raised my rifle, but the creature was already gone, disappearing into the shadows before I could even get a clear shot. I cursed under my breath, moving quickly to a better vantage point, but I knew it was too late. The creature had already sensed me. It was playing with me. It wanted to see how I would react, to test my strength, my resolve. I moved again, this time with more caution, my eyes darting between the trees. I knew it was out there, just beyond my sight, but I couldn't see it. And then, without warning, it lunged. I barely had time to raise my rifle before it was on me. The Wendigo's claws slashed through the air, narrowly missing my face. I fired, the shot ringing out in the forest, but it was too fast. The bullet missed. The creature screeched, a high-pitched, blood-curdling sound that made my blood run cold. It was too fast, too agile. I couldn't keep up with it. It swiped at me again, its claws raking across my arm. I felt the pain shoot through me, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't let it get me. I shoved my rifle into its face, pulling the trigger again, but it swerved just in time. It was toying with me, getting closer and closer until I could feel its breath on my neck. I scrambled back, my body screaming in pain, but I didn't stop. I had to keep moving. I had to survive. A narrow escape. I ran blindly through the woods, my heart pounding in my chest, my thoughts scattered. My arm bled, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't afford to stop. The Wendigo was still behind me, its growl growing louder as it chased me through the trees. I could hear its footsteps, heavy and relentless, getting closer with every step. I didn't know how much longer I could keep this up. My legs were starting to feel like lead, my breath ragged and painful. I had to get to the truck. I had to get out of the forest. I crashed through the underbrush, blindly pushing forward, but I could feel the Wendigo's presence closing in on me. It was faster, stronger, and it was hungry. It wanted me. It had been hunting me since I entered these woods. I didn't stop running until I reached the clearing, where my truck was parked just beyond the trees. I didn't look back as I threw myself into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut behind me. My hands were trembling as I fumbled for the keys, my heart still racing. The growl of the Wendigo echoed in the distance, but I didn't dare look back. I started the truck, my foot slamming on the gas pedal, and I sped off into the night, the creature's roar fading into the darkness behind me. But I knew this wasn't over. The Wendigo was still out there, watching me, waiting for the next moment it could strike. If you've been captivated by this story and want to hear more spine-chilling adventures, subscribe to the channel now. By subscribing, you're supporting the creation of more terrifying content that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Don't miss out on the next part of this eerie journey, where the darkness only grows stronger. Hit that subscribe button and join us as we delve deeper into the mysteries that lurk in the shadows. Part 7. Confronting the darkness. The night was thick with fog, the kind that made every tree look like a twisted silhouette, its limbs stretching toward the heavens like the hands of something trying to claw its way out of the ground. I sat in the truck for a long time after I left the forest. My hands shook uncontrollably as I gripped the steering wheel. The blood from my wounds had soaked into my jacket, but the physical pain felt like nothing compared to the growing dread that had taken root deep inside me. The creature, the Wendigo, was not just a beast. It was something much darker, something ancient, something far beyond the realm of what I had been trained to hunt. I had been tracking cryptids for years. I had faced things that no one should ever have to see, monstrous shapes in the swamps of Louisiana, strange creatures in the Nevada deserts, but none of them had ever made me feel this way. This, helpless, the Wendigo was different. It had a presence, a force. It didn't just hunt for food, it hunted for fear, for the terror it could instill in its prey. And it wasn't done with me yet. I pulled the truck onto the dirt road that led back to the ranger station, the headlights cutting through the mist in front of me, but even the light from the truck couldn't chase away the shadows that seemed to follow me. The entire forest felt like it was watching, waiting, as though the trees themselves were alive, their branches closing in, hemming me in. Gabriella's warning echoed in my head. This forest is different now. It's not just the creatures. The forest, it feeds on fear. She was right. I hadn't understood it then, not fully, but I did now. The Wendigo wasn't the only thing in those woods. There was something else, something deeper. The very ground beneath me seemed to thrum with an energy that made my skin crawl, an energy that had been disturbed by my presence. The Wendigo was the physical manifestation of that dark energy, but it wasn't alone. It was just the tip of the iceberg, the unseen force. I couldn't stop thinking about the eyes. The way the creature's gaze burned through me, like it knew everything about me. It knew my weaknesses, my fears, and it used them against me. But there was something more to it, something I couldn't place, something ancient. The deeper I thought about it, the more I realized that the Wendigo wasn't just a predator. It was a part of the forest itself, a being tied to the land, to the very essence of the place. As I walked through the ranger station the next morning, Gabriella was waiting for me, her face pale. She didn't need to say anything. I could see it in her eyes, the same look I had seen in the eyes of people who had stared into the abyss and had seen something so horrifying, so incomprehensible, that it had broken them. She knew. She knew what I had encountered, and it was worse than she had let on. "It's worse than I thought," she whispered, as if speaking louder might summon something from the shadows. "The forest, it's awake, and it's angry." I didn't have time for her to elaborate. I didn't want to hear any more warnings. I had seen enough. The creature was real, and I had barely survived. But I had a job to do, and that meant I had to keep moving forward. The others who had gone missing were still out there. I couldn't leave them behind. I couldn't let it win, following the trail of fear. I gathered my gear again, loading the truck with supplies. Tranquilizer darts, cameras, the usual tools for a cryptid hunt. But this was different. This wasn't just about tracking down a creature anymore. This was about understanding the force that had awakened in these woods. I wasn't just hunting the Wendigo. I was hunting the darkness itself. I went back to the area where I had encountered the creature. The trail of blood had faded, but the air was still thick with the scent of decay. I parked the truck at the edge of the forest and made my way through the trees, following the same path I had taken the night before. The ground was slick with moisture, the trees twisting overhead like skeletal fingers blocking out the sunlight. The forest was oppressive, the air dense with fog. But it wasn't the fog that bothered me. It was the silence. The eerie, unnatural silence that pressed in on me from every direction. The forest felt like it was holding its breath. I reached the clearing where I had found the bloodstain and crouched down, examining the area. The tracks were still there, but now they seemed to lead into the heart of the forest, to a place I hadn't ventured yet. Something inside me told me that I was close, very close. The creature was nearby. And this time it wasn't just hunting me, it was hunting everything. I followed the tracks, my heart pounding in my chest, my rifle at the ready. The woods were still, too still. Every step I took felt like a step closer to something I couldn't explain, something that wasn't just hunting for food, it was hunting for something far darker. I felt a shiver crawl down my spine, and my grip on the rifle tightened. As I walked deeper into the forest, I noticed something else, strange markings on the trees. Not just the usual scratches left by animals or branches. These were deliberate, carved into the bark with an unnatural precision. Symbols. Ancient symbols etched deep into the wood as if someone, or something, had left a mark, a warning. The symbols seemed to pulse with a dark energy, and the closer I got, the more the air seemed to thrum with that energy. I traced one of the symbols with my fingers, feeling a strange tingle pass through me. The hairs on my neck stood on end, and for a moment I could swear I heard something. Whispers, faint and unintelligible, like the wind was speaking to me. The sound was almost familiar, like a distant memory, but I couldn't place it. I moved forward, deeper into the woods, my mind racing. The markings on the trees were growing more frequent, more intense, the symbols growing more intricate, and the feeling of being watched becoming impossible to ignore. There was something in these woods, something ancient and malevolent, and it was tied to the Wendigo. I could feel it in my bones, a shape in the shadows. The path became narrower as I moved forward, the trees crowding in around me. The air felt heavier with every step, as though the forest was closing in on me. I could see the faintest flicker of movement between the trees, but whenever I looked, there was nothing. Just the shadows, the whispering wind, the steady pulse of darkness that seemed to throb from the very heart of the forest. And then I saw it, a shape, a silhouette. It was barely visible, hidden in the darkness between two trees, but it was there. I could feel its presence, feel the weight of it pressing down on me. It wasn't just the Wendigo anymore. There was something else out there, something watching me, studying me. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to face whatever it was. I moved cautiously, trying not to make a sound, my heart in my throat. The shape didn't move, didn't even breathe. It was as if it was waiting for me to come closer, waiting for me to step into its trap. I knew that I was getting closer to something I couldn't handle, something that was beyond me. And I knew that whatever it wasn't going to let me leave. The unseen hand. I took another step forward, but the ground beneath me shifted. I felt the earth tremble, a low rumble that vibrated through my feet, and before I could react, the ground cracked open. It was as if the earth itself had split apart, swallowing everything in its path. The trees around me groaned and cracked, their roots tearing from the soil as the forest seemed to move, alive with some dark energy. I stumbled back, my heart racing. The air was thick with a smell of burning, like the forest was being consumed from within. The ground beneath my feet gave way as I slipped into the crack, falling into a darkness that seemed to stretch forever. I reached out, grabbing hold of the nearest tree, but it was too late. The darkness closed in around me, and for the first time I felt true fear. And then I heard it again, the whispering. It was all around me, in the trees, in the earth, in the air. The whispers were no longer faint. They were loud, overwhelming, filling my mind with images I couldn't understand, memories that weren't mine, thoughts that weren't my own. The darkness pressed in from all sides, suffocating me, and I could hear the Wendigo's growl, deep and menacing, echoing through the woods. I had to get out. I had to survive. But as I climbed my way out of the crack, I realized something. The Wendigo was no longer the most terrifying thing in these woods. The forest itself was alive, and it had been waiting for me, waiting for someone to uncover its dark secrets. Part 8. Uncovering the agency's secrets. The forest had a way of swallowing you whole. The deeper I went into it, the more I realized I wasn't just tracking a cryptid. I was hunting something much older, much darker. It had been centuries, maybe longer, since a creature like the Wendigo had emerged from these woods, and the agency, had known about it all along. I wasn't naive. I knew the government had its secrets. I had worked in the shadows long enough to understand that not everything we did was out in the open. But the truth, the real truth about what I was hunting, was darker than I ever imagined. It wasn't just about keeping people safe or protecting national interests. It was about controlling a force of nature, and I was just one small piece in a much bigger puzzle. The agency's role in all of this became clearer as I sat alone in the motel room that evening, the dim light of a single lamp casting long shadows across the walls. I had pulled up the files again, sifting through them, trying to make sense of the information. But there were gaps, holes in the story that didn't add up. The names of past cryptid sightings, strange disappearances, government intervention in the cover-ups. It was all connected, all part of a much larger operation that I was now a part of. The dark origins. The file on my desk was thicker than I expected, filled with pages of reports, photographs, and handwritten notes. As I flipped through it, I found something disturbing, a report about the Wendigo, one that was dated over 30 years ago. The creature wasn't new to the agency. It had been here before. In fact, there were multiple entries in the file about strange occurrences in the forest dating back to the 1950s. But the reports weren't about the usual cryptid investigations. These reports were about containment, about tracking the creature and, in some cases, capturing it. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that there were mentions of something far darker than the Wendigo, an entire ecosystem of cryptids, each more dangerous and intelligent than the last. The agency had been aware of them for decades, studying them, tracking them, and sometimes even manipulating them. They weren't just protecting the public from these creatures. They were experimenting on them. They were trying to harness their power. My stomach twisted as I read further. The agency didn't just send agents like me to hunt these creatures. They sent us to control them, to study their behaviors, understand their physiology, and weaponize their abilities. Cryptids were no longer just something to be feared. They were assets, tools, and I had been a part of it. The file revealed a deeper conspiracy, something that went far beyond what I had ever imagined. There were mentions of experiments conducted in secret government labs, some of them successful, some disastrous. The Wendigo, the creature I was hunting, was just one piece of the puzzle. And the agency's plans were far more extensive than I had realized. The more I read, the sicker I felt. I had signed up to protect people from these creatures, to uncover the truth behind the disappearances. But now I knew the truth. The agency wasn't just hunting these cryptids, they were playing God with them. The betrayal. The weight of the file in my hands felt like an anchor, dragging me down into a sea of guilt and disbelief. I had trusted the agency. I had believed in the mission. But now I wasn't sure what I was fighting for anymore. Was I just a pawn in a much larger game, an expendable piece of the puzzle? The phone call came late that night. My supervisor, Ronald Pierce, was on the other end, his voice low and controlled. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "David, I need you to keep going. The Wendigo situation is escalating, and we need you to contain it. You've got one more chance to track it down and neutralize it. The agency's resources are at your disposal." I stood up, my hand tightening around the phone, my mind racing with what I had just uncovered. "What are you really asking me to do, Ron?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "I've seen the files. I know what you've been doing. You're using these creatures, controlling them like experiments. You're making us part of this twisted agenda." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then, in a voice colder than I had ever heard, he responded, "You don't understand, David. You're not in a position to ask questions. You signed up for this. You knew what it meant. Now you're going to do your job." It was the cold, ruthless answer I had been expecting, but it hit harder than I had anticipated. The truth stung like a slap in the face. I had been a part of this. I had been hunting these creatures for their utility, for their potential, for something far more sinister than I had ever realized. I slammed the phone down, my heart pounding in my chest. The betrayal was suffocating. I had signed up to hunt these creatures, to uncover the truth, but I never imagined that the truth would be this dark. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't saving anyone. I was just a cog in the machine of a much larger conspiracy, one that used fear, manipulation, and monstrous creatures as tools for power. The hunt continues, but I wasn't going to let it end like this. I couldn't. The Wendigo was still out there, still hunting, still preying on the innocent. It wasn't just a creature anymore. It was a symbol of everything that was wrong with the world I had stepped into. And I wasn't going to let the agency use it as a tool any longer. I gathered my gear, the weight of the situation pressing on me. My mission hadn't changed. I still had a job to do. But now there was a new purpose behind it, one that wasn't just about capturing the Wendigo, but about ending the agency's manipulation of these creatures. I would stop the Wendigo, but I would do it on my terms. I wasn't just going to be another expendable asset. I headed back into the forest the next morning, my resolve hardened. The darkness that had once felt like an enemy was now my ally. I would take down the Wendigo, but I would also expose the truth, no matter the cost. The forest was still my battleground, but now I was fighting for more than just survival. I was fighting for redemption. The Wendigo wasn't just a monster. It was a symptom of a much larger evil, one that had been festering for years. But I was done being a pawn. It was time to fight back. Part 9. The Final Confrontation. The forest was alive. It wasn't the usual pulse of life you would expect from nature. The gentle rustle of leaves, the soft whisper of the wind, the distant call of birds. No, this was something different. It was a deep, oppressive energy, an ancient force that clung to the trees, the earth, the very air. And it wasn't just the Wendigo that had been awakened. It was something older, something that had been lurking in the shadows of the forest for centuries, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. I could feel it now, the weight of it pressing on me from all sides. The forest had become a labyrinth, twisting and turning, its pathways never quite leading where you thought they would. The trees loomed like sentinels, watching, waiting. It was as though the forest itself had become a living entity, its roots entwined with something far more sinister than I could ever understand. The Wendigo was only a part of it. It was the physical manifestation of the forest's hunger. The creature had been hunting for years, but now it was no longer alone. And it wasn't the only predator in these woods. I had come to kill it, to end its reign of terror over Morgantown and the surrounding areas. But as the days had passed, as I had learned more about the creature, more about the force that had created it, I realized that my mission was no longer as simple as hunting a cryptid. It was about something far deeper. The Wendigo was a symptom of a much darker, much older evil, and if I didn't act fast, the entire region could fall prey to it. The calm before the storm. I sat on a fallen log just outside the ranger station, my eyes scanning the forest that stretched endlessly before me. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, leaving the world bathed in shades of purple and dark blue. I could feel the weight of the night pressing in, thick and suffocating, like the forest was closing in around me. The wind had died down and the usual sounds of the woods were absent. No rustling leaves, no movement, only the silence. It was too quiet. I thought about the night I had spent in that motel room, the thoughts racing through my mind as I tried to make sense of everything I had learned. The Wendigo was not just a beast, it was an ancient spirit born from the depths of the forest itself. The legends had always been true, but I hadn't understood just how true they were. The Wendigo had fed on human fear for centuries, using it to grow stronger, to become something more than just a monster. It had learned, adapted, and evolved, and now it was more dangerous than ever before. I looked at the trees, the twisted trunks and gnarled roots, and felt a shiver run down my spine. The Wendigo had become a part of this forest, a guardian of its darkness. But it was only one of many creatures that lurked in these woods. If I didn't act soon, more people would die. More families would vanish without a trace, leaving only the whisper of their names to haunt the forest. I stood up, my body aching from the past few days of hiking, tracking, and waiting. The battle was close. I could feel it in the air. It was only a matter of time before the Wendigo made its move, and when it did, I would be ready. The final plan. I had a plan. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. I knew the Wendigo's movements. I had studied its patterns, its behavior, and I knew that it would strike again soon. The creature hunted at night, using the darkness to its advantage. But I had something it didn't, the sun. It would be harder for it to move through the woods in the daylight, and that was when I would strike. I wasn't alone in this. Gabriella Ross had agreed to help me, although I could see the fear in her eyes. She had lived in these woods long enough to know what was out there, but even she had no idea how deep the darkness ran. We had to work quickly, or the Wendigo would slip through our fingers again. We had set up cameras around the area, hidden in the trees, capturing every movement, every sign that the Wendigo was nearby. But I couldn't rely on just the cameras. The creature was too smart, too fast. It knew when it was being watched. So I needed something more. I had arranged a decoy, a small speaker system hidden near the edge of the forest that would play the sounds of a wounded animal, a deer, something that would attract the Wendigo's attention. I had used this tactic before on other hunts and it had worked. The Wendigo couldn't resist. It would come. It always did. But this time I wasn't just luring it in for the kill. This time I was luring it into a trap. A trap that would force it to reveal its true nature. The hunt begins. The night fell quickly, and the air grew colder. Gabriella and I crouched behind a large boulder, the sound of the decoy playing softly in the distance. The forest around us was still, too still, and the weight of the silence hung heavy in the air. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck rise as the shadows stretched longer, the darkness closing in on us. The growl came first, low and guttural, cutting through the silence like a knife. It was far off, but it was unmistakable. The Wendigo was close. I could feel it. The hairs on my arm stood on end, and I gripped my rifle tightly, my heart hammering in my chest. Gabriella leaned over, her face pale in the moonlight. "It's coming," she whispered, her voice shaking. I nodded, trying to steady my breath. The plan was simple: lure the Wendigo into the open, get a clear shot, and take it down before it had a chance to retaliate. But I knew better than to assume it would be easy. The Wendigo was more than just a creature. It was a predator, and I was its prey. The growl grew louder, closer now, and I knew it was time. My pulse quickened as I peered through the scope of my rifle, searching for any sign of movement. The creature moved through the trees with unnatural speed, its form a dark shadow in the moonlight. It was getting closer, but it still hadn't fully emerged from the trees. Then it appeared. The Wendigo. It stood just beyond the clearing, its glowing eyes locked onto the decoy. Its massive form was hunched over, its skin stretched tight over its bones, its claws long and sharp, glinting in the moonlight. The creature's mouth opened wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth, saliva dripping from its lips. It was hungry, and it was about to feast. I held my breath as the Wendigo stepped into the open, its eyes scanning the area. It didn't seem to notice us, not yet, but I knew that wouldn't last long. It was too smart, too cunning to fall for our trap for long. I slowly raised my rifle, aiming for the creature's chest. I waited, my finger on the trigger, my heart pounding in my ears. This was it, the moment of truth. Then the Wendigo turned, its eyes locking onto mine, and I froze. For a moment, everything stood still. The world held its breath. It was smart. It had seen the trap, and it wasn't going to fall for it. The Wendigo let out a deafening screech, a sound that shook the trees and reverberated through my bones. It was coming for us, faster than I could have imagined. I had no time to react. The creature lunged, its claws slicing through the air, its teeth snapping shut just inches from my face. I fired. The shot rang out, but the Wendigo was already gone, darting to the side with a speed that defied belief. I cursed under my breath and quickly reloaded, but it was too late. The creature was upon us, its claws slashing at the air, its growl filling the night. I fired again, but the Wendigo was too fast, too powerful. It was a blur of motion, a whirlwind of fur, claws, and teeth. I could feel its breath on my skin, its hot, rancid stench filling the air. It was too close and I couldn't escape. Then everything went black. Part 10. Aftermath and Reflection. The forest was quiet, too quiet. I had survived the Wendigo's attack, barely, and now, as I sat in the damp clearing, my mind couldn't quite process what had happened. The gunshot, the creature's terrifying presence, its unnatural speed, and then the world going black. I remembered the weight of the earth beneath me, the cold, the wetness of the forest floor as I had tried to gather myself. But there had been no final moment of clarity, no heroic victory. I was alive, but at what cost? The Wendigo had left me lying there, close to death. But I had managed to pull myself together, retreating in the chaos, stumbling back toward the truck and away from that monstrous creature. I'd fought back. I'd shot. But it had escaped. It had evaded me. And now here I was, alone in the aftermath of something far greater than a mere creature. The darkness that had been hiding in these woods for so long wasn't something that could be eradicated with a bullet or a tranquilizer. No, what I was dealing with was far older than anything I had been trained for. The Wendigo was only one piece of the puzzle, and now I had to face the terrifying reality. The forest itself was an active participant in the hunt. It had been feeding on fear for centuries, and it wasn't going to stop anytime soon. Not unless I did something about it. But what could I possibly do? As the night stretched on, I felt the weight of the silence around me, the silence of the forest watching. The creature had been toying with me, but that wasn't the most frightening thing. The most terrifying part was that it was only a piece of the puzzle. It was the product of something much larger, something far more ancient. And I was part of it. I had been drawn into this web of secrets by the very people I worked for, the agency that kept the truth hidden. I had become a pawn in a much larger game, one that I hadn't understood at first, but I did now. The agency's true nature. The phone call I had received from Ronald Pierce had been unsettling, even though I had expected it. It was the same cold tone he always used when giving orders. No emotion, no hesitation. But this time his words were different. You've done well to survive, but now it's time to finish the job. There was no warmth in his voice, no praise for what I had accomplished. It was a simple command, an order, and it felt as if nothing had changed. The Wendigo had attacked me, had nearly killed me, and yet I was expected to go back out there and face it again. But this time I had a different agenda. I wasn't just going to track the Wendigo and follow its trail. I wasn't going to act as an agent of the agency anymore. No, my mission had changed. I had seen too much, I knew too much to continue being their pawn. The agency had been conducting experiments on these creatures, studying their behaviors, their powers, and using them for their own gain. I had been a part of that machine, unknowingly contributing to the very darkness I was trying to destroy. I had to stop it. I had to expose the truth. And then I realized something even more horrifying. This wasn't just about one cryptid. This wasn't just about one creature lurking in the woods. The Wendigo was a symptom, a result of something far more dangerous. The agency's manipulation of forces far beyond our control. The Wendigo was just one of many creatures they had studied, and they didn't just want to control them. They wanted to weaponize them. They wanted to harness their power, their darkness, for something much more sinister, and I was helping them. The Wendigo's return. The sun was setting as I made my way back into the heart of the forest. The shadows stretched long and twisted between the trees, like fingers reaching toward the sky, as if the forest itself were preparing for the return of the Wendigo. It had been a day since I had been attacked, A day since the creature had nearly torn me apart. But I knew I couldn't rest. I had to finish this, one way or another. I was back to where I had first encountered the creature, the area where I had found the bloodstain on the rock and the strange tracks in the mud. I had no idea if the Wendigo would return to the same place, but I couldn't risk waiting any longer. It was time to face it again. I moved quietly through the trees, my senses on high alert, listening for any sound of movement. The wind had died down, leaving the forest silent once again, the air thick with anticipation. The ground beneath my boots was damp and slick, the earth alive with the smell of wet leaves and decay. But as I moved deeper into the woods, I could feel the weight of something more than just the forest pressing down on me. Something ancient, something alive. And then I heard it, the growl. It was low, almost imperceptible at first, but it reverberated through my chest. The Wendigo was here, and this time it wasn't waiting for me to find it. It had found me. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. I couldn't see it, but I could feel its presence. It was moving in the trees, darting from shadow to shadow, just beyond my vision. The Wendigo wasn't just stalking me anymore. It was preparing for its final strike. And this time it wouldn't let me escape. The final battle. My rifle was ready, the tranquilizer dart loaded and set to fire. I moved carefully, knowing that any mistake could be my last. The creature was close now, its growl growing louder, its presence pressing in from all sides. I could feel its eyes on me, watching me from the shadows, studying my every move. Then it appeared. The Wendigo. It was even larger than I remembered, its massive frame filling the space between the trees. Its eyes glowed in the darkness, pale and unnatural, reflecting the faint light of the moon. Its fur was matted and torn, its claws sharp and glinting like knives in the night. But there was something else, something darker about it. Its presence was more than just a creature. It was a force, a primal entity born from the forest itself. I raised my rifle, my hand steady despite the pounding of my heart. I had been hunting this thing for days, tracking it through the forest, piecing together the mystery of its existence. But now, standing before it, I understood the truth. The Wendigo was not just a creature, it was a force of nature, an ancient predator that had been lurking in these woods for centuries. And now it was hunting me. The creature lunged. I fired. The dart hit its side, but the Wendigo barely flinched. It let out a deafening screech, its claws slashing through the air as it charged at me. The force of its attack sent me crashing to the ground, my rifle flying from my hands. I scrambled to my feet, my heart racing, but the creature was already on me, its jaws snapping. I ducked just in time, the Wendigo's teeth grazing the air above my head. I could feel the heat of its breath, the rancid stench of decay filling my nostrils. It was too fast, too strong. I could barely keep up. But then I remembered the trap. I had set it up earlier, hidden among the trees, using the terrain to my advantage. The Wendigo was predictable, its hunger clouding its senses. And now, as it charged at me, I led it straight into the trap. The ground beneath the creature gave way, a pit that I had carefully prepared earlier. The Wendigo fell, its massive body crashing into the earth with a deafening roar. It struggled, its claws digging into the ground, but the pit was too deep. The creature was trapped. The aftermath. I stood there panting, my body trembling with adrenaline. The Wendigo was trapped, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. The creature was powerful, and it wasn't going to be contained forever. I stepped forward cautiously, keeping my rifle ready, but the Wendigo no longer seemed like the creature I had encountered before. It was exhausted, its growls weak, and its eyes no longer gleamed with the same predatory hunger. It was fading, its strength drained by the tranquilizers and the trap. But I knew this wasn't the end. This creature, this ancient being, was a force of nature. It would find a way to escape, and when it did, I had no doubt it would come for me again. David Harris, a seasoned cryptid hunter for a secretive government agency, began his journey with a clear, albeit dangerous, purpose: to track down and neutralize cryptids, creatures of folklore that the average person believed were mere myths. For years, he had faced creatures that lurked in the shadows of our world, creatures that didn't belong in the realm of the living. But nothing could have prepared him for the horror he would face in Shoshone National Forest, Wyoming. What started as an assignment to investigate a series of mysterious disappearances quickly turned into a struggle for survival. When David first stepped into the forest, he didn't just find a missing hiker or an elusive animal. Instead, he found the Wendigo, a creature of dark legend, an ancient being tied to the land itself. This wasn't just a hunt. It was a battle with something far older, far more terrifying than David could ever have anticipated. As David ventured deeper into the forest, he uncovered unsettling clues, strange, smudged tracks that didn't belong to any known animal, the eerie silence that pervaded the woods, and the chilling sensation that he was being watched. The Wendigo was no ordinary cryptid. It was intelligent, it was cunning, and it was hunting David just as much as he was hunting it. But the creature wasn't the only danger in the forest. There was something older, more ancient, tied to the very earth beneath David's feet. The forest itself, David soon realized, was a living entity, a force that fed on fear, one that had been manipulating and controlling these cryptids for centuries. The deeper David went, the more he discovered the disturbing truth. The government agency he worked for was not simply trying to contain the cryptids. They were studying them, using them for experiments, even weaponizing them. The Wendigo wasn't just a monster to be destroyed. It was a part of a larger, far more sinister agenda. The agency had known about these creatures for years, and they had kept their knowledge hidden from the public. But David wasn't just a hunter. He was a part of the system that had been manipulating these creatures, using them as tools. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. He wasn't just fighting a creature of the woods. He was fighting against an entire organization that had been playing God with forces they barely understood. It was a betrayal, and it tore him apart. As David continued to track the Wendigo, he realized that the creature was not just a mindless predator. It was a product of something much darker, a force of nature that had been disturbed by the agency's meddling. The creature fed on fear, and as it hunted, it grew stronger. The more David fought to stop it, the more he realized that this wasn't just a creature he could kill. It was a part of something larger, something far beyond human control. The final confrontation between David and the Wendigo was nothing short of harrowing. The creature, once elusive and cunning, finally faced David head-on. It was a battle for survival, for the truth, and for redemption. But the creature, though weakened, was far from defeated. It was a relentless force, and David had to outsmart it, using all of his training and every bit of his strength to survive. In the end, David emerged victorious, but the victory was bittersweet. The Wendigo was captured, but the cost was high. The truth about the agency's manipulation of cryptids, the darkness that lurked behind the curtain, would remain hidden from the public. The government had silenced the truth, buried it in classified files and covert operations, and David knew that the true battle was not yet over. The Wendigo was just one of many cryptids, and the agency's agenda was far from complete. The profound lessons from David Harris's journey. David Harris's journey is one of survival, betrayal, and revelation. It's a story about confronting the unknown, about learning to face the darkness not with fear, but with the courage to understand it. There are deep lessons that can be drawn from his experiences, lessons that resonate with us in our daily lives. The power of facing fear. One of the central themes of David's journey is the power of facing fear head-on. When David first entered the forest, he was scared. He was uncertain. But as he faced the Wendigo, he learned that fear could either cripple him or fuel his drive to survive. Similarly, in our lives, we are often faced with challenges that fill us with dread. The unknown, the daunting tasks, the challenges we don't feel equipped to handle. But just as David learned, the only way to conquer fear is to face it, understand it, and move through it. Fear isn't something to avoid, it's something to confront and learn from. The consequences of ignoring the truth. David's experience with the agency reveals how ignoring the truth can lead to devastating consequences. The agency had manipulated creatures like the Wendigo for years, hiding their true nature to serve their own agenda. This manipulation not only created chaos in the forest, but also caused untold suffering to the innocent people who were caught in the crossfire. The lesson here is that when we choose to ignore the truth, whether it's about the world, our lives, or the systems we participate in, we allow the darkness to grow unchecked. We must seek the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, because only by understanding it can we prevent further damage and begin to heal. The importance of standing up for what's right. David's shift from being a pawn in the government's covert operations to standing up for what he believed in was a pivotal moment in his journey. He realized that the work he had been doing, hunting cryptids for the agency, wasn't just about survival or tracking down dangerous creatures. It was about exposing the truth and standing up against an organization that had been using those creatures for its own gain. This lesson teaches us that we are all faced with moments in life when we must decide whether to continue doing what's easy or to stand up for what's right. Standing up for what's right may not always be the easiest choice, but it is always the most important one. The connection between humans and nature. As David ventured deeper into the forest, he began to realize that the Wendigo wasn't just a creature. It was a manifestation of the forest itself. The Wendigo fed on fear, but it was also a product of the environment it inhabited. This deeper understanding of the connection between the creature and the forest reminded David, and us, that humans are not separate from nature. We are a part of it, and everything we do affects the balance of the world around us. By understanding this connection, we can make more conscious decisions about how we interact with the world and the creatures that inhabit it. Redemption and the power of change. David's journey wasn't just about hunting cryptids or surviving the Wendigo. It was about redemption. By the end of the story, David had learned that true redemption comes not from defeating an enemy, but from understanding the darkness and choosing to stand against it. Redemption isn't about running from our past mistakes. It's about learning from them, changing our course, and moving forward with a new purpose. David's story teaches us that we have the power to change our lives, our choices, and even the world around us, as long as we are willing to face the truth and fight for what is right. If you've enjoyed this journey through the dark, mysterious world of cryptids and the life lessons drawn from it, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel. By subscribing, you support the creation of more thrilling, thought-provoking content that dives deep into the unknown and explores the mysteries of life, nature, and survival. Your support helps fuel the next chapter of these stories and ensures that we can continue creating more captivating, spine-chilling narratives. Hit that subscribe button and join us in unraveling more mysteries that lurk just beneath the surface. Thank you for being a part of this incredible journey.